Hello to all my gravity defiers out there. My name is EJ and welcome to my channel. If you're a usual subscriber, you know Wicked is not in my wheelhouse of things to usually talk about, but I do love a witchy good time. I do love complicated characters, and I do love something just a little bit gay, so I have to dive into this movie in some capacity. But instead of doing a normal review, I want to look at a topic that's always been on my mind, especially in pop culture entertainment. In this year, we are going to be looking at the difference between antagonist and villain. What is an antagonist and what is a villain? While in theory, both of these may sound similar, for me, there is a clear difference. We'll use the massively popular Wicked as a prime example of what separates a character from being an antagonist to being a villain. We'll also look at the shifting of a once iconic villain to a protagonist and how that throws off everything we know. Wicked, for as glitzy and glamorous it could be, it is a well-rounded story with a lot of meat on its bones. There's a lot to dive into. So I want to look at this movie and look at its antagonist and look at the villain, compare them, contrast them, and see what the actual difference is. Because as similar as those names may be, they play very different roles. They are very different weights. One is far more evil than the other. Yes, we're going to be diving into it right now with my Wicked antagonist versus villain breakdown. When I look up the definition for antagonist, this is what it tells me. A person who actively opposes or is hostile to someone or something, an adversary, specifically our main character. The antagonist is the foil to our main character. It does not have to necessarily be the villain. In this scenario, it is Glinda. Glinda, played by Ariana Grande in the film, is our antagonist. She is there to be an adversary, a person in front of our main character, which is Elphaba. That does not mean that Glinda is a good person or a bad person, a villain or a hero. She's this third thing, an antagonist. I love the role of Glinda in this film. I love the role of Glinda throughout. I think it's fun to have this kind of ditzy, blonde, cute character who is not as dumb as we think she is. She is smart, she understands a lot, but she understands her role. That is a key part of why she's an antagonist to me, especially towards the end of part one. There's going to be spoilers here. It's Wicked. You should know Wicked by now. But yeah, by the end of part one, where she actively goes with who I believe are the villains, she is making a decision there, but it's to me not a villainous decision. It's that adversarial decision. She says, I need to keep my spot. Glinda has a lot of privilege. She's from, the upper uplands. She definitely has a position of power, and she wants a further one, and she can only get so far with her privilege, with her, I just don't want to say rich white privilege, but she can only get so far with that. So she knows to actually get power, she needs to align herself with the villain, but that does not make her a villain. That makes her our adversary. Before we actually get our main villains for Wicked, which definitely come near the third act of the movie, we get our antagonist with Glinda throughout. She is constantly poking, prodding, and standing in the way of Elphaba. There is a lot of smaller antagonist things. I love an antagonist who is just kind of annoying our main character, who is just there to always be in the way. That's what the role Glinda serves. She is not the villain of the story, but I don't think she's a perfectly good character. I often have issues with her. Glinda and Elphaba during Defying Gravity, when they're like, we're going to talk about all the dreams that we've had. Girl, what dreams? Where were y'all connecting? I am missing a key part. And that's, again, it feels like Glinda knows her role in Elphaba's life. She knows that she's not going to be able to be that sisterly role because of how society looks at her. That makes her an antagonist. She is not willing to go that extra mile to be a better person, to be on the side of our protagonist. She wants to just be opposite of it. And that doesn't always necessarily mean that she's evil. I don't think Glinda has an evil bone in her body. I just don't think she's a nice person. I think she's so used to the life that she wants, the goals that she has, and she's going to get them. Does that mean she's going to make the best decisions? No, she chooses the life that she chooses, and as Elphaba says, I hope you're happy. I hope this is what you want. And Elphaba seems resigned in this. She seems like she understands what the role of Glinda is in society. I often think there's interesting interesting note of this is having Glinda work for the more evil people, because that keeps someone on the inside. You have like a mole. You have somebody who is maybe not the worst person working for the evil people, and she can kind of be there to monitor that, to maybe help out when she can. That's the good role of an antagonist. They're often there to just kind of be what you need when they need them to be. A good example of this is Draco Malfoy in the Harry Potter movies. He was always messing with Harry Potter. He was always up in that boy's face, but when the time came to it, by the end of the movies, you started seeing that he was more of an antagonist than a villain. Voldemort was always the villain. The Death Eaters were always the villain. For me here, the Wizard and Morrible were the villains. The antagonist, though, somebody who is there to add smaller conflicts to our main character's journey, is that. And I really think Ariana is a great Glinda. I think this character is so interesting, but she adds more notes to her. Ariana's specific performance gives me that more of the, I know she knows what she's doing, especially when Fiyero calls her out of like, oh, that was real smart of you. And she was just like, what do you mean? I would never do anything smart. Like, I would not be playing games. My girl's always playing a game. She's always 2 steps ahead, and that's what makes a good antagonist. She knows where she needs to be in the position, but she's also knowing how smart she needs to be, how she needs to play the game. A good antagonist plays the game. Villains aren't often, to me, the best game players. They're usually dumb, one-track minded, as we will see with our villains here. I love an antagonist. I love someone who has motivations, goals, that aren't maybe not the most pure, but we understand them. I understand Glinda's position. Do I agree with it? No. Go with Elphaba, ride that broom, and you guys become best friends and the witches of the land, and you fight the wizard. But she knows that's not her role in society. She knows she could be used better places. And as we see with the Elphaba and Glinda story, as we get to part 2, the role that she plays a big part in keeping Elphaba safe as well. So it's a complicated story, but that's why I love an antagonist. Antagonists are complicated. Villains often bore me. I think that's why we've gotten into the anti-hero, kind of cool, fleshed out bad guy era of like post-Joker, Michael Myers in the Rob Zombie movies, that he needed a backstory. We're definitely in more of that era, and we're leaving it a little bit, but I love somebody who, those villains don't have to be that role where we have to change a villain to make them more sympathetic. No, give me an antagonist to be that role, and then give me a good villain. That takes good writing, and Wicked, again, has such good writing. By definition, a villain is a character whose evil actions or motivations are important to the plot. My goodness, is Morrible and the Wizard villains. They have, they come off, especially Morrible in the first little bit, so warm, so motherly, but she has motivations and evil intentions that are leading towards the plot, that lead her towards the wizard. So the wizard and Morrible can have their plan to hurt the animals, to kind of run Oz with their powerless ways, though Morrible is a bit more stronger. And again, Morrible, why are you listening to the wizard? She knows her spot, though, in the hierarchy of evil. I think it's funny because I think the wizard is less evil than I think Morrible is. I think Morrible is main baddie. She is goal-minded, straightforward, evil, manipulates. The manipulation of Elphaba and Glinda, we see the Glinda manipulation during Defying Gravity, during that last act. It is so good, so strong. The wizard tries it as well. I love that Morrible is this character, though, that we meet, that we think is friendly, and it just kind of grows into this more villainous role, and she keeps this kind of attitude and energy up, and we see it as much as the disdain that she has for Glinda's character, but we're like, oh, that's just, again, Glinda's annoying, she's our antagonist. We like this character who is kind of sassing Glinda, and then you realize, one, it's so cruel, the way she talks to her, and then we're realizing, oh, I don't need to be cruel to her, I need her now, I'm going to manipulate her now. It's this great villainous role. Morrible is such a fun villain to watch unfold, because it takes a while to get there. And then we have the wizard. If you understand the Wizard of Oz, if you've seen the original, you know this man is powerless, you know he has nothing, so you're like, oh, okay, cool. But seeing him here in Wicked, you realize that he isn't the villain of the Wizard of Oz, but he sure is a foe, a foil to everything. But Wicked, my goodness, he is the villain. His manipulation to try to get Elphaba, who I believe he knows is something attached to him. I think he's well aware of it. What he does, how he does it, the way he's like, oh, this monkey is just always I just hate how evil he is. Like, he is just so disgusting, and I don't think there's a redeeming quality. I know he wants a family, and I think, that is very much his explanation of why he's going to be evil, but the way he treats, Elphaba, the way he makes the whole town, him and Morrible are so quick to make Emerald City realize that she's the baddie, the way he just talks down to Glinda and her, it's this crazy manipulation. But again, I don't think he's as evil as Morrible. I think he wanted to get home for a long time, and that makes sense, but he's also just liking the power he has. He knows that he has to make a villain for everyone to get around him. He's using his real world, knowledge to go into Oz and then to kind of bring our dirty politics, our dirty, racism there, because this movie definitely touches on it. I know, I don't want to sound woke in my wicked review, but this movie definitely talks about a lot of societal class issues, racism, and things like that, and it uses the Wizard of Oz template to tell it, but it does it really well. And we see that the wizard maybe isn't the most evil man up front, but his intentions are evil. He has fascist intentions. I hate to say it, oh my goodness, but he really is just this evil dictator, and we just don't feel it and we don't see it, but it's there. And you can definitely see that manipulation by the end of it. These two villains are so interesting because they are true villains to me. There is nothing like, oh, I keep trying to be like, well, the wizard knows. No, he's evil. He's doing bad things. Morrible, though, I feel like isn't even trying to pretend to do the, oh, but I want my family. I want to go back home. I want it. She's just like, no, I don't like these animals who talk. They're gross. And I'm like, I often say about real life politics, I want my evil people to be evil in front of me and tell me, I don't like you. I don't like you for X, Y, and Z. That helps me out. That's what I needed here. I got my X, Y, and Z. I figured out who and what was happening through everything. Oh my goodness, the story of this just sends my head through a tizzy. And lastly, we have Elphaba. Elphaba's such a fun character because she went from an iconic villain, she was the Wicked Witch of the West in Wizard of Oz, to Elphaba, this woman who is just trying to fit in, who's just trying to make her life happy, who's trying to, help her little sister who ends up not, needing help because, my goodness, we'll talk about Nessa Rose when we do a part 2 of this. My goodness, I'm going to fight that woman. Anyways, Elphaba's such a fun character because she started off as a pure villain. She was the foe to Dorothy. Dorothy had to kill her to get, everything she needed. There was foes along the way. The wizard kind of was the antagonist, but our main villain in the original was the Wicked Witch. Now she's the protagonist. She's the hero of the story, and we're realizing the story that we may have known about a villain is much different, and that goes to the old saying of like, whoever wins the battle gets to kind of write the history of it. We only know the history of it, of Wizard of Oz, because the bad people won, because they got to have the upper hand and write history, but Elphaba gets to have her story, have her arc, and we learn so much about her. I love this protagonist that we in our head know as a villain, but it's being switched and being told in a different way. That does not happen often. If you go to like Michael Myers, was he ever the protagonist in something? We've never switched his narrative to being the interesting, good focus. I think one of the only examples I could use of that is like maybe the Chucky franchise, of making him like the slasher villain, and then by like Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky, we're almost like following Chucky's story. So we're making the bad person the protagonist, which is an interesting narrative, but we don't often have a person who was a villain in another story and now a different story. They're the hero, they're the protagonist. But Elphaba is not perfect. She is definitely a complicated character. She's, has a little bit of anger in her. She has a little bit of a drive that I think sometimes blinds her to what could be. There's a moment in Defying Gravity where they're both like, I hope you're happy now. I hope this is what you want. And I'm like, Glinda, what do you want? Elphaba, what do you want? Like, Elphaba's motivations are strange, because in theory, I just think she wants to be respected, and she wanted, the wizard to respect her, but once she doesn't have that, what does, does she want? She just wants to live. She just wants to be a person who can survive, and to me, that is the best protagonist. She doesn't have this overarching, I need to save Oz. Yes, she wants to save the animals, but like, in reality, she wants to save herself. She has the motivations of, I need to survive. That is one of my favorite plots. It's not this Marvel movie, the whole world's gonna end, we need to save everybody. It's not this like isolated, I must save my love interest, I must save this. Those get boring. I love a woman who's just like, I need to to get myself out of the situation and make sure I am not killed and treated as a villain. It's great, it's interesting, but also sometimes villains need to know their role. If she needs to pretend to be the villain, so, you know, the real villains can expose themselves eventually, Elphaba's okay with doing that. Such a complicated, fun character. Elphaba's so great, and I love what Wicked has allowed this manipulation, this twist of a villain to protagonist that never happens, and it's so fun, it's so refreshing, and it's why I think Wicked is playing so well and stands the test of time for the 20-something years it's been out. Well, that was a deeper dive into villains, antagonists, protagonists, good, evil, real-life politics. I cannot believe I got onto all of that just talking about Wicked. What did you guys think of my video? What did you guys think of the movie? Are you big Wicked fans? Did you go see it opening weekend? Are you seeing it on weekend too? Let me know your feelings down in the comments below. This is Thanksgiving week. I'm recording this and releasing it. So happy Thanksgiving to all my followers. I love you all so much. Make sure you guys subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe, comment. I said that already. Oh my God. I'm just so excited to talk about Wicked with you all. So leave me some comments right down below.